Thanks, Leslie. Hey, everybody, I'm Adrian, and I'm here because I'm on a winning streak. No, I'm kidding. Oren said that to me, and I got a kick out of it when I was in treatment. I'm an alcoholic, and it's my pleasure to speak with you this evening. I hope you hear something that helps you in my story. I thought about this, and you'll hear as part of my job, we'll go to in a little bit, that I give talks actually quite a bit is for my line of work. And, there's two styles. I either will have notes or just sort of speak from the heart. And I was wavering on what I was going to do tonight, and I'm just going to speak from the heart. So if things are not linear, please forgive me. I'll try to keep them as linear as possible, but I'm just going to speak as my higher power speaks to me. So I guess I should tell you my sober date is July 17th of 2020. It's the last time I used a drink or had any mind-altering substances in me. So coming up on a year, Lord willing, in a few weeks. I have a home group. I have a sponsor that I stay in contact with, and I'm a big fan of AA. So starting at the beginning, I was born and raised in rural Mississippi on a cotton farm. It's 10 miles from the nearest town of 1,000 people. So really the middle of nowhere. First few years of my life were pretty good, but I can tell you, starting about age 8 or 9, I began to notice something that was amiss. My dad is still a pretty serious alcoholic. He doesn't drink, but I'm not going to say he's not still an alcoholic. He's just a dry drunk, if you will. That was the first time I really started to notice it. I grew up in a house full of chaos and fear. My dad was pretty abusive, not very kind to my brother or I. I really can recall from the time I was 8 or 9 years old, primarily feeling fear as the primary emotion that I had, and that I was never safe. And that I didn't fit in. I was very blessed to be really academically gifted, and that was becoming obvious to other people at that time, and sort of obvious to me. So that led to some ostracization from my peers as well. So all that to say, like many other stories that I heard during treatment and in the rooms, I felt very alone and fearful. And that progressed. My dad's behavior got more erratic. He would leave for prolonged periods. You couldn't really trust anything he would say. He actually lost our family farm, which was a 5,000 acre farm, through a series of bad decisions when I was a small child. And so we went, our lifestyle, if you will, changed rather abruptly. There's sort of things that we were afforded and had around the house. I mean, always had a meal, but it was just different. We sort of became outcast even in our little small society there. I remember sort of some of the classic ACOA things, the child of alcoholic things. I didn't want to have kids over to my house because who knows what the hell my dad was going to do. So all that to say, that continued. I got in a lot of fights at school. I was sort of bullied quite a bit. I was small for my size, or small for my age, but that changed for junior high. Then that, I just sort of reached the point where I was scared everywhere. So I just fought everybody. And that took me up to the time I had my first drink. So I had my first drink at age 15. That was the first summer that I'd had a legal job. I'd been working on various farms the summers before, as people did, just sort of paid under the table, but I could actually be paid legally that summer because I was finally 15. As people did at the end of the day, the guys were like standing around their trucks, smoking cigarettes and drinking beers. And eventually they were like, after asking numerous days in a row, I was like, yeah, give me one. And I drank my first beer. It was a Coors Light. I remember it distinctly. Um, and to paraphrase my sponsor's language, that I had found it. The grass became greener and the sky became brighter. I had found something that I was looking for. I recall feeling very hollow and just not right for most of my life, actually. And I didn't feel that way after I even had a beer. Um, just a little bit of others, this, excuse the non-linearity here. I grew up in a very religious household too, a very staunch evangelical Christian household. So that was interesting because my dad would go to church and then would be blacked out the night before. And so it was a lot of volatility there, and that was difficult for me to reconcile because I was told about the dangers and evils of drinking and yet witnessed it all the time at home. But the second time I drank, which was a few weeks after that, I drank a 12-pack of beer, full 12-pack, just drank the whole thing. They sold it in 12-pack. I thought that's how much you're supposed to drink. And I was pretty damn sick the next day. Said I was never going to do that again. That lasted about 6 weeks. And that began a period of really in a habit of binge drinking that continued throughout high school. On the weekends, primarily, it would be a blowout. I could drink a lot of alcohol at the time, and then shake it off and be okay. During that time, I was working very hard academically. I didn't know what I wanted in life other than the fact that I wanted to get away from where I was. And that was when I first realized I wanted to be a physician, which I am, because I've had a strong drive to help others. And so I worked exceedingly hard and was very fortunate to get accepted into an Ivy League school, and went to the University of Pennsylvania for college, which was really a gift. And I got out of that Christian household and the sort of the strict rules there. And that really opened up my my drinking career, if you will. And I, like many others, I began to binge drink more. It became almost a daily occurrence. I began to use other substances at that time, primarily pot. Began to sell it. Needed money to fuel my habits. My talking about stupid things or just things that have happened. My second or third weekend in college, I blacked out, hit my head, woke up in the hospital the next morning. Was told I almost died from blood loss. I still have a massive scar on the back of my head. I'd fractured my skull, taken a bit of a brain injury. The blood alcohol level was 320. I was 18 years old. So, that may have cued me in that I had a problem at that time, but not really. I just thought it was a funny story to tell other people. So I went ahead living that life and somehow managed to make it through 3 semesters of college, keeping up a really good GPA despite that. But during this, Penn does a thing where you can't join Greek life until your second semester. And so I joined my second semester, and that was gasoline on a fire. I joined a fraternity. And that eventually caught up with me, and I actually had to withdraw from school my second semester of sophomore year. It was for mental health reasons, which is true, but really the issue was I was just too damn drunk all the time to continue to pass any classes. So I made it through that and finished school, got into medical school, continued to binge drink and really use whatever substance you would put in front of me, because it would give me that feeling temporarily that I was okay. It would allow me to escape, and I wouldn't feel that fear or that feeling that I didn't fit in for temporary. Oh, I'd feel terrible when I would come down off of it, but there was just a temporary amount of relief. Uh, and I chased that up until last year. I made it through medical school and backed off. I mean, I was working too hard to really consume too much. I met a woman and got married during medical school. I went to medical school back in Mississippi, and then I came to North Carolina, which is where I live now. I live in Durham, and have been here for 11 years. I did training here in internal medicine and geriatrics, pulmonary and critical care. I'm primarily a researcher do research on the cognitive impacts of critical illness. So spend a lot of time learning about the brain and addiction. Go figure. So, yeah, like so many others I've heard, my story isn't particularly unique for certain parts of it. I continued through really about 2015, binge drinking, having prolonged periods, usually a couple of weeks where I'd drink every day, and then I would be able to, taper off, if you will, for a week and be a function and maintain some sort of level of function in society. But I remember a few distinct things. One is I was terrified of going out drinking with friends because I didn't know what the hell was going to happen. Because once I started, there was no brakes on the car. And I really had no control over it, despite, all the willpower in the world. And that was frightening because, hopefully I would wake up in my own bed the next day. But may not. I can say through truly my higher power and just a tremendous amount of protection beyond what I certainly have done myself. I've never been in trouble with the law. I've never had any issues despite driving intoxicated multiple times, being pulled over multiple times, which is a blessing, but it allowed me to continue doing what I was doing too. Starting in 2015, that was really sort of an inflection point in my life. My first year of pulmonary and critical care training, I was on call every other day for a year. So I didn't sleep for more than 3 or 4 hours at a time for a year. And that broke the last little bit of me that I had. I can say from 2015 until last summer that I don't know if I experienced anything that I would really call joy in my life. It was a pretty miserable existence, and I was just existing. And I was just trying to make it to the next drink or the next joint just to feel better temporarily. My wife at the time got pregnant in 2016. She told me about it, and I said, that's interesting. I guess we're going to have a kid. I was sort of ambivalent about it. I can tell you I'm not ambivalent about it now, but I was at the time. And 2016, there was a week that was really, really an interesting week. It was in November of 2016. My daughter was born on November 14th. I had been reflecting about my own father leading up to the birth of my daughter and said, I'm not going to be like my dad was. I'm going to stop drinking. I can't have her in a household like I was raised in. That's just not right. So I said, come Thanksgiving, she was due on January 1st of 2017. So I said, Thanksgiving, that's going to be it. That's going to be the stop date. Like many other stop dates before, I'm sure that wouldn't have worked. But a few things happened. On a Monday of that week, my wife's grandmother, who was on home hospice, her husband called us to come visit her, and she died in front of our eyes with me administering morphine at the bedside at home, which was pretty traumatic, particularly for my wife, who had never seen somebody pass away. Unfortunately, with my line of work, I've seen that almost on a daily basis. That part wasn't foreign, but very traumatic, particularly when it's a loved one who was in a lot of distress, suffering. That weekend, we had a big planned baby shower, which was a couple's baby shower, and it was it was really a big damn party is what it was. I started drinking whiskey at like 10 o'clock that morning with my friends. It was probably about a fifth deep by the time we were wrapping up. And at the end of it, our dog, my dog, just wasn't looking right. And I started noticing she had signs that she was like bleeding out everywhere. And I said, this isn't right. So I ended up having to take her to the emergency room. And we were told she was going to die that night. She probably had acute leukemia. And I said, well, I guess they gave her some medicines to keep her comfortable. And I said, well, she could die on the couch at home with us. So we're sitting on the couch. And then my wife tells me that, the first thing I did when we got home was poured a huge glass of whiskey and was drinking that and smoking a cigarette outside. And my wife tells me that her water broke. And I was like, oh, shit, I guess we're going to be having a kid. And here I am just like absolutely obliterated. So we had a kid that night. And, I welcomed my child into the world, really intoxicated. And she spent a month in the neonatal intensive care unit because she was born at 32 weeks. She's fine now. But that was really terrifying, to watch your child, who I really loved then, and I certainly love now, so much that brings tears to my eyes, suffering like that and not knowing if she's going to live. And that the rails completely came off after that. I bopped through life the next few years, drinking almost daily. I was still excelling at work. I won a number of awards. And then starting in late 2019, I got to the point where I realized I couldn't even take a day off drinking because I would get so shaky. Or I would wake up with horrible nightmares and not knowing what was reality or not in the middle of the night, and sweats, which is signs of withdrawals. And I was working with the time with a psychiatrist to try to taper off using Ativan and Camprol, which wasn't going to work. That was way beyond that. But just bounce around. Of course, at this point, my marriage wasn't doing well. My wife and I had disdain for each other at best. Really, I had no positive emotions toward most anybody. I hated myself. I hated what I was. And it's hard to give others love if you don't have it yourself. It's just a ball of anger and fear still, that same fear that I had. At this point, it was fear of dying. I remember distinctly for the last year or so that I was drinking and using that I knew I was dying. And I'd reached the point in the winter before I went into treatment that I knew this was going to kill me, probably from liver failure or from choking or vomiting in the middle of the night. And I was okay with that. I really didn't want to be alive anymore. And I dwelled on that quite a bit. In February, the pandemic hit. And gosh, that was, I mean, it's ultimately a blessing because it got me to seek treatment for me, in that aspect. Certainly not going to say the pandemic was a blessing for society, but any sort of structure I had, I was trying to do other things like exercising, which I was to try to maintain my health, trying to watch what I would eat, which would work until I started drinking. Then I would eat a bunch of garbage, calories. I gained like 80 pounds over about 3 years, I think. Is that right? It was probably over like 4 or 5 years. Gained a lot of weight. the pandemic hit, and I was one of the people in the state to take care of sort of the first wave that hit us because they were getting shipped to tertiary care centers, like where I work, into our COVID unit. I took care of one of the first, I'm not going to be more specific, but it wasn't the first death in the state, but it was close to it. And the family was really upset with me, and actually it was one of probably the nastiest experience I've had in my career with the family. The amount of really displaced anger, I think, is ultimately what it was, but I felt the brunt of it. And I was told to take a few days off and go recover because it was obvious that, this was distressing for everybody. Um, and that was like the worst thing, to tell an alcoholic to go isolate by themselves, and not work and not worry about that. So at this point, I was drinking about a fifth a day, maybe a little bit more. And I was also getting to the point where I was having to drink a little bit before I went into work in the morning because my hands would be too shaky to do my job. That continued. That pandemic cycle continued. God, it was truly miserable. I would get home from work. I would go to my like media room, sit on the couch, put on some crappy TV, drink heavily, smoke pot, and like sob in the corner. And that was my life. And I'd do that until I'd black out. Then I'd get up the next morning and do it again. And that went on for a few months. Then a couple of things happened. My wife at the time was worried about me, I think, and didn't want to be around me, which I can't blame her for that. I say at the time because we'll be getting divorced in a few weeks here, just waiting for the 1 year period of divorce in North Carolina to be up. But we got into a fight one night, and I was, no surprise, not sober. And I did, out of the numerous things that I've done in my life I'm not proud of, I threatened to kill my wife and daughter. And I remember it's taken me a while, but I recall the thought in my head is I was going to kill myself too, because I didn't want to be alive anymore. And perhaps there was an afterlife that was better, and at least I could have some people that I loved with me. That was the thought I had. Unbeknownst to me, this put into motion a series of events. My wife began to make plans, was scared for her life, rightly so, and began to make plans to leave me and take my daughter with her. And so I got home from work on a Tuesday. It was July 14th last year. I remember that day. I dipped out of work early because I was really hungover that day. I didn't have any drinks before I went to work that morning, so I was struggling to make it. So I dipped out of work at like 2:00 somehow. Got home. On my way home, I had like 6 or 8 drinks. That knocked just warm vodka in a glass. That knocked the shakes down. I got a new guitar that day. And so that was actually put a smile on my face, a rare smile. And my family would usually get home around 5:30 or 6. Wife would pick up the kid from daycare, bring her home. And it's come 6:30. I had not heard anything from him. I said, that's a little odd. And so I called my wife. She didn't answer the call, but she sent me a text saying that she had left, and that I needed to get help. And she was taking my daughter. And I began to notice things like she had cleared out all her clothes and toiletries. she'd also cleared out or canceled all the credit cards or money, so I had no access to any money that she knew of. I had like any proper alcoholic, had a couple of $1,000 squirreled away that nobody else knew about, because you never know when things may happen. That was a rough day. It was a rough night. I don't know how much I drank that time, but it was close to 2/5, I would imagine, that night. And I resolved that I was going to kill myself that night. I didn't have anything left to live for. I was miserable. I was in a living hell. I was cut off from the world. There was no positive emotions in my life. I couldn't come up with a good reason to keep living. So I just decided that was it. My wife she's smart. She took all my guns, unbeknownst to me. So that probably saved my life. A number of things happened that saved my life that night. I called two friends to tell them bye, really. And the second one, it's a good friend, very perceptive. I think he knew what was up. And he forced me to stay on the phone with him for hours until the sun rose the next day. And the next day, after a couple hours of fitful, drunken sleep, I called PHP, which is the Physicians Health Program, which is the monitoring program for professionals in North Carolina that tries to help them if they have addiction issues. And told them I wanted help. I was going to die. I was okay with it. And I knew I was going to die for my addiction, but I didn't know there was any way out. And I'd been living like that for a long time. So I thought, well, at the very least, I got nothing to lose, because my wife told me that there no way in hell I was going to have access to my daughter unless I got help. So that was ultimately what twisted my arm. So I called them and they asked a few questions, and it was pretty quick. They were like, "You're going to need inpatient treatment." I said, "Can we do this outpatient? I probably, I'm a good guy. I'm good at studying and taking tests. I'll be okay." I got you. Thank you. They said, "No, you're going to need inpatient." And it took me probably about 20 minutes to come to terms with that. And I said, "Hey, you're probably right." And I was thinking, I was like, getting away from inpatient, getting away from this COVID mess for a little bit, is probably not a bad idea. So I asked them where they would recommend, and they recommended Pavillon. They had a list of a few places. They recommended Pavillon very highly. I contacted Pavillon, and I presented there 3 days later on the Friday for treatment, with thinking it was going to be a 41-day program. But I'm sure they would let me out early for good behavior. And I was there for 12 weeks. So, I'll be honest, I didn't want to leave at the end of those 12 weeks. So that's what it was like. And that's what happened. Detox, they were immensely kind. The nurses treated me well. I went through primary, spent a few weeks there, and then the rest of my time at extended care, and a few things happened. One of the first things I remember was probably a week or so after being in treatment is I laughed. And it wasn't just a false laugh. It was a deep from the heart laugh. And I hadn't laughed like that I could recall in years. And I felt happiness. We were somebody was telling some ridiculous story in the lounge there. And that just, it got me crying. I was laughing so hard I couldn't catch my breath. And I said, wow, this is awesome. Things I learned at Pavillon. um, is that I was an alcoholic. I didn't have a problem with that. I sort of already knew that. I had beforehand no intention of having anything to do with AA because I thought AA was something that people just went, told each other they were alcoholics, and then talked about Jesus. And I'd had my share of organized religion. That wasn't for me. But God and I had an understanding. I wouldn't mess with him. He wouldn't mess with me. We would just go our separate ways, was sort of how I approached religion. Um, but I got permission at Pavillon to, from working with Wolf really quite a bit, to pursue a God of my understanding and have a personal relationship with them, and to not bring in an organized group if that's not something that was helpful to me. And that was an immense life changer, and something, to be honest, I've been looking for since I was a child. My degree, my undergraduate degree, is in religious theory and religious studies. I've been searching for that connection and ability for really since I was a small child. And I found it while I was at Pavillon, and my life has been irreversibly changed for the better. Um, a few other things that happened there. It became fairly obvious that my relationship with my wife and kid wasn't, or with my wife probably wasn't going to be repaired, but we are going to try. Ultimately, that didn't happen, and I think it's for the best, which in the essence of time we don't have to get into. But I'll tell you something else, that the first 4 or 5 weeks while I was there, I was still holding out in the back of my mind that thing of, I can probably drink just a little when I get out of here. It'll probably be okay. Every once in a while, I'm not like the rest of these people. I'll be all right. Well, turns out I am. I'm just like everybody else. And once I got that notion out of my head and became okay with it, I achieved a level of peace and serenity that I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I have every day, but more days than not, I feel that way. And I have ever since about September of last year when I was in treatment. And I'm immensely grateful for that. I really owe my life to AA and Pavillon and to my higher power. And I've changed so much for the better, and so grateful for it. I was able to keep my job. I have such a great boss. I didn't get any trouble with work. Thankfully, I hadn't done anything horribly egregious that I could be caught for. I don't think I did, but who knows? I don't remember a large part of months there. Um, I am living in a different house now. My soon-to-be ex-wife is living in another, and my daughter is here right now, and I get her 2 weeks of the year, or 2 weeks of the month, not weeks of the year, every other week, sort of. And I have a great relationship with her. I find joy in life, in the small things. I remember just another story. Leslie, how am I on time? About 2 minutes? 5. Okay. I was using that dilapidated elliptical machine they have at the men's EC garage. I don't know if they still have that thing. It was on its last legs. It needed to be put down when I was there last year. But it was all there, and I could see it was raining outside, and I could see the water coming in through the leaves, and it was refracting to make little rainbows everywhere. And it's like, wow, that is really beautiful. And just being able to enjoy the beauty that's all around us. It's pretty darn cool. So I'm a better father. I'm a better human. I've had people tell me that they don't really know what I've gone through. That I just seem like a much happier person, and it's because I am. And I wish that all for all of you if you haven't found that for yourself. Um, a few more thoughts as I'm wrapping up here. Uh, Things that I learned is I'm just not that damn special. I'm not that unique. The people that have been on meetings with me have heard this. Um, I'm just like everybody else. I have problems. I have a problem with addiction. I'm not a bad person trying to get good. I'm a sick person trying to get well, and that takes work every day. And something else I've learned is that you can do it if you put the work in, and there is an alternate way. And one thing I want to close with is a quote that I had taped to my computer for a while. And I'm going to paraphrase it. It's from the Count of Monte Cristo, which is something that I'd read years ago. And to paraphrase the thought is, there is no joy or misery. There's just one state relative to the other. You can't experience the highest highs without knowing the lowest lows. And I feel like I've known the lowest lows. I was truly in hell for years, and now I'm not. And it's a joyous experience. And thanks for letting me talk and listening to me ramble. And thanks, everybody.